The Jacksonville Jaguars, the current favorites to win the AFC South. They are minus 155 to win the AFC South. Wild when you consider where this team was a year ago. And let's start with that. Just how far the Jags have come, and just, I guess, the mindset around the Jags has come over the last year. This is a team that around this time last season, I think you wanted to pick them to win the division because there were underlying factors, and we thought there'd be a huge bump with Doug Peterson. But even in the most optimistic of terms, it was hard to do that. It was hard to say this team could win the AFC South. Now they're the decided favorite to win the AFC South, and I think a lot of people, me included, has real hopes for what they could potentially look like, giving some of those contenders in the AFC a run as soon as this year. So it's all happened very fast for the Jaguars, but I don't think that most people that have those sorts of aspirations for this team or the view of this team are really getting too far ahead of themselves.
Even going into last year, it was, I talk about this usually with personnel or something, and going from, crap to average, and like just bad to average is a huge bump. And I consider Doug Peterson, like, at least he's a competent coach. That's what I went to last year. It was like, he's not Urban Meyer, and that's a huge bump for this team. And it turned out, oh yeah, Doug Peterson's pretty damn good at this offensive play calling stuff. And he's a pretty dang good designer as well, and has a feel for his personnel. So even though I was glass half full about this team because they just didn't have Urban Meyer, that was really one of the big bumps. And also my belief in Trevor Lawrence is Doug Peterson was even better than what I anticipated, which is really cool. I love a good offensive mind, and also a unique one. Like, you see some Andy Reid with his stuff, but he does different. He has enough of his own personality and enough different chemistry with how he does things. It's nice to have a different offensive feel when so much of this has become kind of there's one meta that's kind of taken over the league. So it's kind of nice to get that different feel. But
what's interesting about that is that, so talking to people there when I was down there a couple of weeks ago, Doug obviously had time off. So he got fired in Philly, and then he has the year off where he's studying everything that's happening around the league. And he brought Press Taylor with him, who was on those Eagles staffs, and then he was on the Colts staffs with Frank Reich for a couple of years, and then he went to Jacksonville with Doug. But Press and Doug were really the only two people who were in Philly. So all the ways they used to call plays, all the ways they used to describe things, they kind of threw all that out. Mm-hmm. And they really started from scratch with their own version of what the Jags offense was going to look like. And a lot of people say that. They're like, no, this is the Jacksonville Jaguars offense for 2022. Right. But it's always based on something else. And even the language is based on something else. The Jags threw all of that away. They started from square one. They literally started calling things differently. So different pass concepts. Doug wouldn't know what they were called. He'd be like, wait, I thought we were calling you. Why are you calling this that? And so that's how new it all was. Yeah. And there are certain elements of it. Two things really stick out in my mind. This is getting a little bit too far in the weeds, but I thought it was interesting. One, all of the motion. Mm-hmm. The Eagles were very stagnant when Doug was in Philly. It's just kind of how they liked to play, how the quarterback liked to play. So they really introduced a ton of fast motion because it was happening around the league, and with their personnel, they thought it fit. So that was a huge departure. And two, Rich Scangarello was an assistant on those Eagles teams near the end. And it was kind of one of those too many cooks in the kitchen situations where he came from the Niners tree, and it was just one more different thing they were trying to do in Philadelphia, and they never really figured it out. But they had exposure, Press and Doug did, to some of those ideas. And so they brought a lot of the keeper movement game to the Jags with Trevor because of his athleticism. They didn't really use a lot of in Philadelphia. So it's not just that Doug was a good play caller going back to his time in Philly. It's just that this entire coaching staff kind of reincorporated a lot of ideas or introduced a lot of ideas that they weren't using before. So it felt really fresh. And I think you could feel that when you watched the Jags last year.
Absolutely. This coaching staff has a lot of guys I even know, like from my time, like with the Raiders, like Bernie Parmalee is the running backs coach. I know him. They just signed like he's a free agent, but they just brought in Nick Holes, who was the UNLV offensive coordinator. He was a longtime Raiders assistant. So he's been a totally bunch of different offenses there. This is this year for Nick Holes, and then even like Richard Angulo was with the Ravens for a while. Like they just have all these kind of different minds there that just, okay, even if they only use 5% of it, that's 5% difference than other systems that you might see throughout the league. And I think the player that I've said encapsulated what this offense was about was Evan Ingram, and how Doug Peterson used Evan Ingram, and I've said this before, is totally different than how he was used in New York. and was using him horizontally. Hey, he's fast, but he doesn't just have to be down the field. Let's use him as a yard after catch guy for a tight end and just using his skill set kind of perfectly. Him and all the other weapons that we'll talk about in a second. But I think the usage of Evan Ingram, why he had a career year, why he actually looked like a solid player that was drafted so high, was how Doug Peterson used him. And I think that's just perfect. It's just like right then and there, right, that guy right there wasn't asked to do what he was asked to do in New York and looked like a bust. Now he looks like a good player because Doug Peterson put him in a position to succeed. And that's just one guy. That's all the skill guys that they had, who they've added to. We're going to get to it, but also the quarterback. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence using his legs out on movement throws and everything, but also this guy has a very quick throwing motion. So let's use the RPO stuff. Let's sprinkle in some of that quick game because he can do it all. So it's just understanding personnel. That's good coaching. And Doug Peterson did it in flying colors last year. So I'm very excited to see this next step with everybody kind of gets a better feel. Hey, this worked, this didn't work, this worked, this didn't work, and just really tighten and really make this offense take another leap, even if they might face a more difficult schedule this year, which I can talk about in a second as well.
The offense felt fresh from a approach perspective, and I think that it led to a fresh way of seeing this team. They felt fresh down the back half of last season, especially. You think about the success they had last year and kind of looking forward to this year. What is the biggest question you have kind of about the 2023 Jacksonville Jaguars offense?
What's the next step for this offense now that they have a true dude as a number one receiver in Calvin Ridley? This was a legit top 6, top 8 passing unit and really offensive unit, especially the second half of the year, but really just overall, they actually stood up. Their underlying numbers were pretty good, even though the second half of the year you really saw kind of the fruits of their labor. But I want to see what the addition of Calvin Ridley looks like. What I think this is going to be magic. I think this is going to be a weekly check-in, even though this team has been a weekly check-in for me for a couple of years now. A couple of years ago was a sicko one. Last year was like morbid curiosity that turned into really optimistic curiosity. And then now it's like, I'm excited to see what it is. The last year, yeah, Christian Kirk had a great year as well. And Evan Ingram, I already mentioned him. And then Zay Jones, they had Marvin Jones as well. It's a top 6, top 8 unit with a bunch of number 2s and number 3s as their pass catchers. Now they got a number 1. What I think is going to be a top 10, top 12 dude in Calvin Ridley. So I want to see that next step. I want to see what that looks like. How does Doug Peterson use Calvin Ridley? Even in the time with the Eagles, Alshon Jeffrey was the best receiver that they had in Philadelphia, and he's a totally different type of animal than Calvin Ridley is at the receiver position. So what does that look like with a true outside guy that can win one-on-ones? How much they use him, which I think will be a lot, and how that trickle down happens with the rest of the pass catchers. Because I'm really excited about it. I'm really optimistic about it. Can't wait to see it. And that's kind of my main question, and hopefully my main answer as well.
It's pretty clean, which I appreciate. When you look at the Jags offense from last year, this is the number that really jumped out to me. So they threw the ball to the concept side over and over and over again. If it's a 3-by-1 formation, you got 3 receivers on one side. It's smoke and mirrors. They're throwing the ball to the trip side because they're manufacturing touches for these guys, and they're manufacturing guys getting open. So last year, the Jags were 26th in the NFL in the number of their targets that went to the isolated wide receiver side. The teams below them are the teams that didn't throw the ball. It's the Bears, it's the Falcons, it's the Titans. On a percentage level, 25% of their targets went to the isolated receiver in their offense.
And that's the X. Whenever you hear me talk about the X, that's the isolated receiver. Sorry to cut you off, but that's why this is going to be exciting.
I'm pretty sure that was the lowest rate in the league. You'd have to do some back of the napkin math. I'm pretty sure that was the lowest rate in the entire NFL. So now you drop in a really good isolated receiver. It's just so clean and easy to imagine based on what their offense looked like last year. The best case scenario for me, and a lot of people have talked about what he can maybe do as a vertical receiver outside the numbers. Totally understand that. And Trevor's throws such a good level 2 and level 3 ball outside of the numbers. Like, not all quarterbacks in the NFL have that arm. It's one of the best things he does. So you can imagine that pretty easily. But what I'm thinking about is just the layups that they can take over there. Yeah. The best case scenario is Stephon Diggs on the Bills. How often the comebacks and curls that you saw when he would threaten vertically, and Josh Allen just taking free money outside the numbers in those one-on-one matchups.
8, 10, 12, 8, 14, just over and over. Yep.
And you don't have to manufacture that. That's just pure talent winning out, and it's an easy decision for the quarterback. So you combine that with all of the stuff we saw from a creative standpoint, and a pretty projectable next step for the quarterback, which I don't think is unreasonable based on the way he played in the second half of last season. And based on the skill position players, the play caller, and the quarterback, we are cooking with gas if this thing clicks into place in the right way. I had them 4th in our top 10 offense rankings. Yeah. This is why. Just because this 6th. Idea, it's so easy to talk yourself into.
Yeah. It's their quartet of pass catchers it's nice. They have some nice synergy. Like you just mentioned, Calvin Ridley on the outside is going to be, he is just an exceptional route runner. Like just truly, like you said, all those isolated routes. And it's not the big body X like a Mike Williams, where it's just like he's just posting up on guys, drop stepping and getting in the post and getting that 10-yard. He's getting the ball pinned on him. Ridley has that, but it's a little more nuanced. But then watch him run out routes, watch him run corner routes, watch him run those comebacks, everything down the field. With Matt Ryan and his weaker arm, they still had magic on the outside because it was just the timing. Trevor throws with that timing. Who has been my comparison for Trevor Lawrence? A supercharged Matt Ryan. Yeah, so
it's a great call.
That's a lot of fun. But then Christian Kirk is a vertical and intermediate slot guy. That's nice. Evan Ingram's your horizontal yak guy. Zay Jones, he was their number 2 receiver essentially last year. It's like now he's basically your number 4 pass catcher. He's a big body zone beater, can work in the red zone as well. So it's just nice skill sets overall. And I like that a lot. And of course, the Trevor Lawrence love. I think you put it in a great way. Is he going to have that seat at the table with the big boys, with the elite guys? I think he's definitely knocking on it already. And I think he's going to take that step up. He is so much fun and and I'm so glad we do these because I get to watch another game to kind of just juice my brain a little bit.
Just refresh your memory for sure.
It's hard not for me to waste 2 hours on Twitter to like just clip a whole bunch of cut ups of Trevor Lawrence just making some just dude throws.
All right. So let me play devil's advocate for a minute.
Absolutely.
Because he's not there yet. All right. So where does he need to be better than he was last year? Because there are still areas of his game where there is a gap between him and the big boys. So rather than just writing this in, what actually needs to happen for him to close that gap?
Pushing the ball on the outside would be the number one thing. He has that in his arsenal. I thought it was was that some of the personnel he did later in the year? I think that's where Ridley will come in as well.
Yeah, it was a lot of scheme stuff. Again, it's like when they're doing slot fades to Christian Kirk when he's lined up inside because like it's just a matchup thing. It's not we have the dudes. They're all manufactured. And that's could be the potential difference.
It's the scheme. That's what Calvin Ridley does, or a true number 1 guy, a true number 1 X does, is that so much of what Trevor did last year was the 1 to 2 to 3. It was where the concept told him to go. Sometimes you just want to break glass and just go, this guy's going to win. Like when you're talking about Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, that's why they always have that option when you're in a trip set is, okay, you can take your one-on-one if you like it, or you read out the trip side. That's kind of like a standard read for a quarterback. Well, if you don't have really a guy out there, I have Marvin Jones as my number 1 guy. Yeah, I'm not going to take my isolated receiver. So I would say just a little more aggression in that path, but he is an aggressive quarterback, but I want to see him take those isolated throws. I want to see him push the ball down the field, and also just a little bit of some pocket kind of holding onto the ball. I don't want to see the Dante Culpepper, fumbling the ball every single time he gets hit when he's in the pocket.
That's my biggest concern. Yes. It's just ball security and looseness.
How's he playing the mud? It was becoming a thing. It was when he had crappy weather, it was kind of getting a little scary. He ended up having some games late in the season. I was like, okay, it's not totally a thing, but how he does in kind of the muck and maybe some muddy situations when it's not great weather. That's really want to see, but he's damn good, guys. He's a fun player and a good player.
I mentioned this on the offensive show. They had 29 turnovers, the 3rd most in the NFL. They were 17th in red zone scoring rate. It got better in the second half of the year. Yeah. Some of those boneheaded red zone interceptions got wiped out.
Some dumb ones.
And that's just get out of your way, man. Just get out of your way. Don't beat yourself. And I think if this team avoids beating itself a little bit more often, especially in certain areas of the field, that's another spot where you could see the offense take a step forward. Their coaches have talked about this. They've been pretty open about it. They were bad in short yardage rushing situations last year. They were 28th in power success rate, according to Football Outsiders. That's 3rd or 4th down with 2 or few yards to go. And now they have Tank Bigsby there as kind of a bigger body back, hopefully, because Travis Etienne was just not getting it done in those moments.
29th in power success rate, and then 31st on runs to the running back in short yardage. So not taking out QB sneaks. So they were even
Trevor,
so taking out the QB sneaks, but it was 30. However you shake it, they were bad in short yardage, and they really were. So I totally agree. That's where Tank Bigsby comes in. It's just as kind of a nice kind of sprinkling of him on short yardage and maybe on 3rd down.
Are we hand waving the offensive line maybe too quickly? They lose Juwan Taylor, who's their starting right tackle in free agency last year. They draft Anton Harrison in the first round to replace him. He's going to be their day one starting right tackle.
And real quick with Harrison, I did like him, but I thought he was a year away from what I think. I think he was more of a projecty type of tackle than a guy.
That Oklahoma offense, it's a big gap between that and the NFL. And even if he had some plus pass protection traits, it's going to be a projection.
He's a traits guy. Yes.
And I think they're excited about him, but it's an unknown quantity until we put the pads on week 1.
Absolutely.
So that's a question. And now the left side of the line, Cam Robinson, their starting left tackle, is suspended for the first 4 games. They have Walker Little, who was a spot guy for them last year, to step in there at left tackle. But now the left guard situation is kind of all over the place because Tyler Shatley, who started there for most of the season last year, he has a heart issue. He is not playing right now. And Ben Birch, who was the presumed starter going into last season, he's still on the PUP list. So there are enough questions about the line, especially with the interior issues potentially cropping up now, where I'm like, man, am I just too quick to overlook this because I'm getting so excited about all the other aspects to this offense?
I'm with you. My note on this, I wonder if we were going to touch on it, was I'm not as sold on the O-line as maybe others are. And I think even Brandon Scherf, who's still a good player, some of his reputation's doing a little bit of carrying still, but he's more good than that kind of world beater elite guy. I've seen him get beat a couple times. Like that used to be like you would never think that with Brandon Scherf, but it's like he's had injuries crop up year in, year out. I think it's more of an okay to solid unit that injected a little bit of youth, but it's not a great unit, which is sometimes that will hold teams maybe ceiling back or even their floor back a little bit. So I'm with you that I think some people are just going, oh yeah, they're fine. And I think that's the right word for it. They're fine, but that's not good. And it's one injury away from being like, ooh, this is a little more questionable. And hopefully this is where Trevor Lawrence is kind of a pocket movement kind of comes into life.
He gets rid of the ball so quickly. He's consistently shown an ability to make his offensive line look better. This isn't someone who's going to compound offensive line issues. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get to it.
I bet we are.
So, and Trevor, I think, had the second fastest time to throw in the league last year, and Brady was number 1. And that honestly shouldn't count because of the way that Brady was playing at times last year. So the fact that Trevor was getting rid of the ball that quickly at this stage of his career when he is willing to take some shots, I think says a lot. One final note about the offense I wanted to mention. This team was number 1 in the league by a lot in EPA per dropback on 3rd down against man coverage in the second half of last season. Talking about those schemed touches.
Yeah.
They did such a good job with different bunch sets and rub routes and mesh, and just they could really do a good job of manufacturing getting guys open in those specific situations. Teams played man against them at a top 10 rate on 3rd down last year. That doesn't compute. They were so good against it. I wonder if they're going to see less man coverage in some of those situations this year, and what happens. Do you have answers when you can't scheme those completions against man? So just one thing to note, because I thought that was
it's a great point. That's a really good point, because I mean, just even think of the first half of the Chargers playoff game. They were baiting Trevor because they're showing man and going into other looks.
He threw that interception. They showed man, they dropped into zone, and he threw that pick to Asante Samuel on mesh. Threw it right to him.
Right to him. And so like that's a great example of kind of like, but that, it kind of speaks to Doug Pearson, that because usually in man, it's like find your best matchup, or create a rub. So the fact that they were successful without a Calvin Ridley kind of speaks to Trevor and Doug Pearson a lot about what they were doing and find the matchups that work.
If you don't give him the answers to the test, if you make him read out zone coverages and it's not easy for him in those situations, that's going to show how far Trevor's maturation has come. I think that's a really important question that defenses will present, and then an answer about where he's at. Getting to the defense, this is going to be, I think, what determines their ceiling this season, because this was a bad defense last year, like an actively bad defense. They finished 26th in weighted defensive DVOA. And there's some things that we can get into and some personnel changes maybe that can make us feel a little bit more optimistic. But what is your biggest question heading into the season about this defense?
Who's getting after the passer? That's number 1. I think for this unit, especially with an offense that might be damn good and playing with some leads, they're going to have to defend the pass. So who gets after the quarterback? They had 3 players last year with a pressure rate over 10%. One of them is with the Titans now, and the other one's coming off a late season Achilles injury.
It's God damn it. I mentioned the exact same thing. It's so funny.
But those are the guys that finished second and third in pressures last year, and they're both probably not going to play. Or one's not for sure not going to play for the Jags, and the other one's probably not going to play until maybe December. And I would say the one guy that was number one is coming back, and that's Josh Allen, who did play well last year, probably his first time on a good team, and you could see a little bit more juice out of him. But they need their former number one pick, Trevor Walker, to step up. He has to look like his pedigree. Has to. The flashes I thought were too few and far between. As a rookie, I was hoping to maybe see a little bit at the end of the year, but he's kind of a tight end killer at this point in time. But they need him to develop. They have to. We have to see more. You have to live up to that pedigree, because if he doesn't, it's a little scary. Arden Key's not there to kind of create some funky looks. And this defensive unit was getting after quarterbacks for a stretch last year. So
they had the third highest pressure rate in the NFL last
That surprised me. I know.
They were fourth in quarterback hits and 20, but they were 22nd in sacks. They only had 38 sacks. So typically you think, oh man, if the pressure rate starts to line up with the sack rate, can this defense maybe be better than we expected? And can the front be better than we expected? The problem with that argument is when you take out two of the guys that created the pressure rate. And that's what Arden Key and Dwayne and added no one. This team had very few resources this offseason, and they didn't go out and get anybody outside. The ways they used those resources were re-signing Devon Hamilton, their nose tackle, re-signing Roy Robertson Harris, and signing Evan Ingram to an extension. That's it. That's how they spent their money this offseason. So there's no outside reinforcements coming, and you lost a couple of the guys who contributed to what your defense looks like getting after the quarterback last season.
Yeah.
So that's a big question.
Big question. But they are betting on their number one pick emerging. I get it, but it's just scary for me because you got to see some proof of concept. You have to see a little bit of a move that he's shown in the playoff game or something like that. But
he was less productive as a pass rusher on a per snap basis last year than Cleveland Farrell.
Oh, he's gonna be my answer for a different question. So I
think we have the same answer for a different question. So
okay. I'll save it. I save it. Yeah, I got plenty of stats for him, so I'll save it for a sec. But just talk about the rest of your defense. The DB room is, I would say, intriguing. Tyson Campbell,
that's kind.
After that,
they are so thin. They are so thin. The optimistic case, in my opinion, about the Jags secondary, when they made the change last season to put Trey Herndon in the slot,
correct,
and they moved Darius Williams outside. After they made that change, when those three were on the field together, their pass defense success rate would have been top 4 over the course of the entire season. And when those guys moved into those roles specifically, that was the best version of them. Talking to Mike Caldwell when I was down there, he said, yeah, Darius sees the game better on the outside. We initially thought he was going to play in the slot for us.
Different animal.
That wasn't it. And he sees the game better on the outside, and we're comfortable with Trey and the nickel. That's fine. Trey Herndon is a guy who's been on the back half of rosters for most of his career. So you're betting on half the season of this working and thinking, it's the disco stew meme where it's just like, all right, well, now we're good. Like we're going to keep making profits on this. But even if you feel comfortable about that group of corners, there's nobody behind them. Nobody. And no reinforcements came. This team spent its early draft picks on offense. Not on defense.
I know.
So the amount of improvement and progression you need, not only from Trayvon Walker, but from Devin Lloyd, from a guy like Andre Cisco, potentially, these guys who are young pieces within that defense, you're banking on that intensely in trying to take a step forward. And I just think it's a kind of risky bet.
Because it's not just one guy that needs to step up. Now they have a guy at every level that needs to step up, meaning defensive line, linebacker, corner, essentially safety as well. That's all right. So say you need 4 guys to step up and 2 step up. It's like, cool. Well, that means 2 guys didn't step up. So that means you still have the 2 holes. So that's your bet. And that's what had me hesitating. And this is a unit that actually received a ton of luck last year as far as drop passes. They were the second luckiest team in defending drop passes, basically opponents dropping passes against them. So it's like, and you still weren't great and you're still getting a lot of luck. Whew, that's a little dangerous. Your division's a little tougher this year because of what they've invested in. So they just need to be more disruptive. They have to. I think this offense is going to be able to ball control. They'll get explosive plays. I think the offense will take care of itself, even if we have some question marks with the line. It's just like the defense has to find disruption. And it's like, who are you pointing at? Who are you betting on to emerge? And it's a little scary right now. I mean, Devin Lloyd, who had a great first month of the season, got benched last year. And that's scary as well.
apparently that's just one of those moments where he hit the rookie wall.
Yeah.
And it was the week-to-week preparation, which is kind of getting on top of him, and the schedule and all of that. So I'm encouraged about his kind of prognosis because he could do it. You saw the flashes where he could do it, and then it started trickling off as the season went along. So in year 2, you're a little bit more comfortable. You've been a pro. I mean, this stuff is, I think, can be overstated. But again, talking to people there, it seemed like that was the biggest concern. So hopefully now with one more year where he just kind of understands the rhythms of an NFL season, it's not like he doesn't have the capacity, because we saw him play really well for stretches early last season.
Yeah, he needs it. Well, that's what has me a little scared real quick just with Lloyd, is that there's kind of some segment of kind of when he was a prospect that were like, oh, he's like Micah Parsons because he can rush the passer, and he's like a below average pass rusher, and they're asking him to do that. It's like, let's keep his box small. Let's keep it, let's limit his asks. So it makes me a little scared that they're like, no, we're gonna have him rush the passer too. It's like, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul there. Like, I think even
it's also a bad blitzing team last year. They're bottom 3 in EPA per dropback when they blitzed. So even if you want them to maybe manufacture more pressure this year, that wasn't a good answer last year. Whew. For each of these teams, we're going to try out a couple quick categories here at the end. We're going to do an X factor for every team, a guy who you feel like it kind of pushed things one way or the other for them this season. Who is that guy for you with the Jags?
It's Travon Walker.
I don't think there's any other answer.
It has to be him. He has to step up. There are so many hopes rely on him if they want to be the team that I think they did. And I mean, I think we both got some numbers. I'm ready to whip out some of these. He was he ranked 6th among rookies last year with 200 more pass rush snaps and QB hits per pass rush. It's the same as Logan Hall and George Karlaftis. And we saw, where those guys were drafted. Logan Hall was, end of the 2nd round, and Karlaftis was end of the 1st round and was a rotational player. He was middle of the pack in quarterback hurries amongst the whole league, 126 overall in QB hits per pass rush snap of the whole league. Anyone with 200 or more pass rush snaps. So he needs more juice. We have to see it. The only highlights that we saw last year was him beating the crap out of some tight end in a run game. And I think he's going to be able to do that, and be a tangible player there, but that's not why you get drafted number 1 overall.
No.
We haven't seen any production from him out of college. That was kind of the Georgia defenders, which, by the way, I think there's going to be a theme throughout these shows that we do where I'm going to wait for a Georgia defender to do something. All these guys that we've heard about for years and years, like one of them's going to do something in the NFL. Otherwise I'm going to start having a stigma. It's going to be like a Penn State running back in the 90s. But he's one. We have to see more. We have to see more moves. We have to see just something, a bend out of you, other than just your strong, long bull rush. But that he's the X factor. They need him to be a guy. Doesn't have to be a freaking top elite guy, but just something out of him this year.
You could maybe say Anton Harrison just because he's going to be starting for them, but the answer is Trayvon Walker. Yeah. The problem with the Trayvon Walker discourse and about the measuring of Trayvon Walker's career is that there's going to be a direct comparison to a guy who's already been better than him. Aiden Hutchinson was good by the end of last season.
Yes, he was.
So it's not like, oh, we needed a pass rusher and there was just no one else there. The next pick was a pass rusher, and the next pick might be a much better pass rusher than he
was. It wasn't like some small school guy. Like when Khalil Mack came out, it's like, well, he's Buffalo, so we don't know the competition. Nah, guy, Heisman finalist from Michigan.
How much better would you feel about the Jags defense right now if Aiden Hutchinson was on this team instead of Trayvon Walker?
Way better.
That's tough.
Yeah. There's proof of concept. This guy was actually productive. Even if the first half was a little, it's the second half. He was a real dude. So yeah, absolutely would feel better.
Breakout player to watch on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Who you got for me?
My joking one is that it's Calvin Ridley coming back as a guy. Where people go, oh yeah, you're really good. It's not.
You from doing
it's
that.
not. My one is Tyson Campbell, because I think people that know that he's a good player, but he has no accolades, no kind of national recognition yet. So I think more on the national kind of bandwidth where the common fan knows, oh, they have a good corner, and his name is Tyson Campbell.
He could be an all-pro player this year. He has that level of ability.
I said easy Pro Bowl caliber player already. And so I think it's usually a year delay. And I think now he's going to have that breakout where people consider him a breakout. He's a damn good football player and already one of the better cornerbacks in the league.
Calvin Ridley was talking about how he's just trying to go up against him every single time he can in camps. And one of my favorite one-on-one reps that I've seen traveling around, Calvin Ridley ran kind of like a subtle double move, like stop and go on the outside, and how smooth Tyson Campbell looked and just sticking with him all the way down the field. I was like, man, that guy is just truly built different, like truly built different. And he moves so well, just so fluid. He's a very good player. I'm interested in what Andre Cisco is going to look like.
Yeah.
Year two, he obviously he was a punchline in year one. It was he was the guy that Urban Meyer didn't know his name. And he's a safety for this team. And I just think that he's had a couple really great games. First game he played against the Chiefs when they played in the regular season last year, he was all over the place, plays really hard. So year two in a real adult defense, kind of being a full-time player, I think he's somebody that has a chance to take another step as a third-year guy. And again, the types of players they need to take steps forward for this defense to be what they want it to be.
That's a good one. This is where you Jags fans, I think you wanted your former number one pick to be mentioned, the breakout player. But I think we're still a little bit away from maybe seeing that. I want to see it maybe second half of the year, but that's kind of where I'm at with all their players.
Jags over under is 9.5. We are stupidly going to be picking the over unders for all of these teams. 9.5 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You going over or under?
I'm going under slightly, like 9
wow.
and 8.
I am surprised.
I know. And it's more just the betting man in me right now. The under 9.5 is plus 125. It's a little more juice on it. And the over is at minus 150. But just overall, I think of this team as a 9 or a 10 win team. So it's flip a coin. And I'm going with 9 today. And it's not because I got so much Jags merch. I got so much Jags stock from this last 12 months. But I'm just trying to be realistic about where I'm at with this defense. So I think of 9 and 8 is where I'm going to go with right now.
I get it. I understand that. I'm going over. The division. I think the division is better. I think the division is better than it's being made out to be. And we're going to get into some of these other teams, but it's still not a good division. And if they're a top 5 offense, which I absolutely think they can be, I expect them to win 10 games. Yeah, so I'm going over.
It was hard when I went through each one of these teams. It was like over. Okay, we got to think about this a little bit because I talked myself into it. Also, though, playing a first place schedule this year, so they got the AFC North, they got the Chiefs.
Aren't they playing the NFC South too, though?
They are playing the NFC South, so that
AFC
helps.
South plus the NFC South. I feel good about those 10 wins.
Okay.
Famous last words. Famous last words. I'm sure I'll feel real stupid about it when they're
in my head. I view them as a 9 or a 10 win team, so it's kind of it's just whatever one day you want to go, whatever side of the coin you want to bet on.